Good afternoon. Welcome to Sports Nothing But Sports with Kent Sterling for Thursday, November 7th, 2019, brought to you by the great people at Today's Dentistry. Call 317-849-2933. Make an appointment to see the great Dr. Mike O'Neill. One of Mike's patients we're going to talk to today, Indiana Hoosier, once a Hoosier, always a Hoosier, Los Angeles Laker, Golden State Warrior, Indiana Pacer, the great Tom Abernathy, the owner of the Indiana Basketball Academy. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great, Kent, and thanks to you, Mike O'Neill does help me with my dental care, but it's a great firm, and I obviously didn't know we were even going to talk about him, but I'm glad to talk to you, and again, I'm glad that you introduced me to Mike, that's for sure.
Let me ask you kind of a big question, because you've been a part of and the owner of the Indiana Basketball Academy for 23 years, and so the game remains a big part of your life. But playing in high school, where'd you play in high school?
South Bend, St. Joe.
Okay. And then for Indiana, and then in the NBA, the primary life lesson of basketball has been for you what?
I'd say, as I look back at everything, what I've taken away is the importance of attention to detail. Basketball, and the coaches that I've had really instilled in me that every single detail is critically important to success. And so I think I've taken that away, and I've tried to convey that to the kids that I've been able to impact, including my own 3 kids.
And mine.
And I guess son. Your son too.
Yep.
But yeah, you learn the importance. One little thing that may seem insignificant really could be the most important thing that is going to happen. And you put a bunch of those things together, and I've seen a lot of great things turn out that way.
It sounds like a Bob Knight lesson.
Yeah, Coach Knight was definitely one that taught me that, is along with, I had a high school coach that was much like Coach Knight, Bob Donewald, who...
Really?
He ended up, after I came to IU, Bob Donewald became the assistant coach at IU, so I got double dose of Coach Donewald. But, so I was fortunate to have coaches that taught those things.
Let me ask you about the 76 team, of course, undefeated and national champs. There are a lot of people who say that a basketball team's got to get along off the floor to get along on the floor and to be successful. How did that team get along off the floor? Did you guys love each other?
Yeah, I'd say we loved each other, but I would also say you went to IU. You
Yep.
know how big IU is, and you know how many diverse opportunities there are for all of us students to do things.
Yeah.
So we weren't together every single minute. We each had our own lives. I was at Sigma Nu. I was in a fraternity, and I have a whole bunch of stuff that would keep me busy off the court. And Quinn and Scott and Kent and Bobby Wilkerson and Jimmy Cruz. I mean, everybody, had other things to do, but I'd say the common element of love for each other is definitely there, but it wasn't that we were spending every waking moment off the court together.
Did you understand at the time? I watched this documentary the other day about the '85 Bears, and there was this wistful look that all these guys had when they talked about the experience and the shared experience and memories that '85 evokes for all those guys. Mm-hmm. Did you guys understand in the moment that this would be 40 years later, that you guys would look at each other and be able to connect again so quickly, which I assume you can? Like if you see Quinn or if you see Jim Cruz, you guys went through a lot of stuff together that makes your relationship unique.
Yeah, there's a lot to that statement that you just made, because there's a lot of different ways to go in that. Like when you're playing on that team, the beautiful thing that Coach Knight taught us was you had to take care of the moment. You had to focus on the task at hand. So what were we, 32-0. So we had 32 unique challenges that were I don't know what the right word is, but we just focused on each game. And so we didn't have the luxury of taking that 30,000-foot view of, man, look at what we're building here. We're 13-0 right now, and man, we could be the last undefeated team, 40 years later, ever to play in the NCAA and win the championship. No, I think, we were consumed with the moment, at hand, and I think that's how we were successful. And the interesting thing, Kent, after you had mentioned I was drafted by the Lakers and played in the NBA for a while, and almost everybody on that starting team did that. We all did, actually. But you don't have time to then, even at that point, when you graduate, you're onto a new venture. You're in the NBA, and you're getting married, and you're having twins, in my case.
Right.
And every one of my teammates were in the same boat. And so sometimes it's not until 20, 30, or 40 years later that you are really seeing the significance of, what was created back in the day. I definitely appreciate it. And when I see Quinn and Jimmy and Kent, who I saw two of those guys today, there is an immediate connection, but, a lot of life, you got to keep moving on and not dwelling on thinking like, some teams that have gone undefeated, and that's their identity, is that undefeated season. And fortunately, I think for most of us, we've had a lot to keep us busy and not only look backwards.
The thing that I miss, I don't know if I knew it in the moment, but when I played high school sports, I loved the process. I loved the quiet in the locker room before a game of everybody getting their focus and everybody getting dressed and kind of thinking the same thought. You were sort of in that same place, and then you got together and you listened to the coach for a few minutes, and then you ran out, and all of a sudden there you were. I loved that feeling of I guess camaraderie and of common purpose.
It's like the Hoosiers picture that you see in watching Hoosiers.
Right.
Yeah.
Was there that, or were you guys so consumed by the challenges immediately ahead that you couldn't kind of get wistful about it?
Well, the other great thing Coach Knight taught us, his saying back then, is the mental is to the physical as 4 is to 1.
Right.
So those moments that you're talking about before a game, those were times that we were hopefully getting mentally prepared. So we were thinking about what had to happen, and just have ourselves ready to play. So
you weren't getting all metaphysical about it and thinking, boy, this is just wonderful. The psychology going on in this room is just magical.
No, we were focused and mentally preparing. And so there was that sort of that silence and that, or excitement, I guess, anticipation, because in our situation, we felt our practices were so hard and so intense that the games were like, man, this is the payoff, because we've already worked as if it was the war has already happened.
Right.
Now we're just gonna get our spoils out there.
Is there a way today to get people to be able to work in the way that Bob Knight mandated you guys worked? Is there a way to break through kind of that membrane where kids get to where you're talking about? Because it seems to me there isn't. Like, I don't see teams that represent that kind of selflessness on the floor very often in college basketball.
I don't study it, Kent, enough to be an expert, and I wouldn't pretend to act like I would give a blanket statement. I think we're in a different era, and there's so much vying for the attention of kids today, and they've grown up in a totally different way than the way I grew up, and,
right.
and we did, some of us back in the day. But it's very difficult to get everybody on the same page and to have that selflessness that you're talking about. And who knows if we're as selfless as maybe people said we were, but I think we were pretty selfless. And here's my example on that. Bobby Wilkerson and Quinn Buckner were first-round draft choices in the NBA.
Right.
Each of them had averages under 10 points a game. So they were single-digit averages their senior year. And I think in this day and age, you're not going to find that many guys being first-round draft choices that weren't selfish enough or have enough opportunity that they're going to not score quite a few points. And so I think that there are two unbelievable examples of what you're talking about, being selfless and doing what's best for the team, listening to what the coach wants done, and they were well rewarded for that. And I think in today's society and today's game, I think it's a hard step for the kids or their parents or their advisors to see that selflessness is going to take them where they want to go. I think people are thinking in today's environment that they need to get theirs to show how good they really are. And sometimes, it wasn't true back then, and I don't know, it may be necessary in today's era. Again, I'm not the expert to have that final answer on it, but those are a few thoughts.
Was there a guy on that team that needed to get his mind right?
You mean that struggled with
or
buying into the whole thing?
Sort of this, I don't know, maybe he had a different agenda at some point in the season, and somebody had to come at him and say, hey, you gotta, or did everybody just buy in? Was that one of these beautiful teams where everybody?
I'd say everybody bought in.
Right?
I can't think of malcontents or guys that were ever showing outwardly a selfishness that detracted from us. Now, again, fortunately, I'm not one that I couldn't tell you really what happened each and every game, but my recollection is, hey, we just played and we didn't worry too much about outside forces, or the ego wasn't driving us, and I can that's my recollection of my teammates.
How good were you in high school?
Well, good enough. Coach Knight gave me a scholarship, number one, but I set the all-time scoring record in South Bend my senior year. So I had a coach that demanded my teammates throw me the ball so I could score.
That's nice.
So it was sort of fun. So I don't know how to compare it in other terms, but I was good enough to play college basketball at IU, and that was probably beyond the reach that I ever thought I'd get to. So, was there an evolution for you, Tom, where you went from being that kid, the record-setting kid, to being evolving into a team-first guy, or was that just your nature anyway? Well, we were talking about Ryan, your son, earlier before we got on air here, and you said he was 1 for 9 his freshman year, and I didn't tell you until right now that I was 5 for 7 in the first until January of my freshman year. That's 5 air balls out of 7 shots.
Oh, my God, really?
So I never scored a point for Indiana University until the first Big Ten game up in Michigan. And so I would say, having a big head and
modesty came quickly.
Yeah, it was. I was modest for a reason. Exactly. So anyway, and then the break came up in Ann Arbor, and that changed my playing time and opportunity.
Did that change the way Knight viewed you or treated you?
Well, he told my mom after that game that Mrs. A, your son earned a scholarship tonight. So
nice.
I think I was on the radar screen, and he at least told my mom that he appreciated me. But yeah, it really gave an opportunity to play more because he could have confidence and trust in me.
Let me ask you about 73, because that's kind of an unheralded team, but it was really, really good. And there was a foul call that went against Downing instead of Walton. First of all, tell me about that, and then tell me whether that loss to UCLA and John Wooden kind of fueled Knight and that team moving forward.
So you're asking unbelievably great questions, and as probably more of a fan than I am, you
right.
remember those details better than I do as a player. So I'll try to answer a couple of those questions. And number one, people have talked an awful lot about that foul going, because it was one of the two were going to foul out because they both had 4 fouls.
Right.
And I honestly don't remember the play, but I know it was a turning point because the game was close. Then they ended up winning 70-59, I think, which is shocking that I remember that score, but they beat us, fairly handily. But as far as Coach Knight and Coach Wooden's relationship, I don't know if that fueled anything negative or not. I honestly don't know anything about the situation between the two coaches, other than they were two of the greatest coaches, coach college basketball.
That's so interesting. It's so different for fans, isn't it? The difference between a fan watching a game and watching a player being immersed in that game in that moment. Again, you don't ruminate. You're on to the next moment, and this moment's gone. We go to the next one, and they just don't nest.
Well, I could be unique, and when you get thrust into visiting the White House and then getting drafted, and then having Jerry West as your coach and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as your new teammate, and you're in L.A. Trying to make a team, you don't have an awful lot of time to ruminate and
right.
reflect on things. And so I think before I knew it, we had twins. My wife and I got married first thing, and then we had twins, and it's amazing how life takes care of pushing you forward and not having you stay in the past that much. There
are a lot of people who live in the past, aren't there? There are a lot of people for whom and you're clearly not one of these guys, who, Shooter Flatch in Hoosiers, 28 sectional, 5 seconds left, 3-2, clank, they live in that moment of either tremendous success or tremendous failure, but you've just continued your march right through.
Yeah, I'd say, it's maybe easy to articulate that or make it sound that way. I mean, there's no question every human being has moments of getting stuck and looking in the rearview mirror. But I think part of my faith since I've gotten older and really started to understand what the Bible has taught has really helped me, not look back in regret or look back in reveling in great moments, because you don't want to miss maybe what God may be having for you in your next moment.
As you're here at the IBA, you've impacted an enormous number of people's lives. I mean, walking in here, I remember games and camps that my son was a part of 23 years ago. The place had just opened. What is it about basketball that's a great lever for you to teach in the kids that you work with the lessons you feel are real important?
Well, the unique background that I had playing at IU and playing in the NBA and just my unique experiences, I think, and having parents that taught me things. And I've got a unique story in that my dad passed away when I was 10, and I had a brother who passed away when he was 15 and I was like 13 or 14. I think he was 16. But so I grew up in a unique way, my mom primarily raising me and my brother, that, I didn't have too big of a head, and I didn't, look, think I was better than really what I was. And so I think that upbringing probably has impacted me to talk to kids in a way that shows compassion and empathy and encouragement, that there's something more important than the game of basketball, the wins and the losses and how good you are, but the lessons that you can take and the way that you can work hard and have fun doing something and learn how to encourage teammates and how to show empathy towards less talented teammates. Those are sort of elements that God has hardwired me to pass on. So those are the intangible lessons that I've taught for 20-some years. And again, I think that's more than just basketball, and that's one of our little trademark things here. Is we are about more than just basketball.
Do you have any trouble communicating that to parents, or do they walk in here kind of with that understanding?
You get a pretty wide range of parent expectations, over 23 years. I mean, people have what they are hoping to get out of a basketball academy, because that's what we're called, Indiana Basketball Academy. But the people who stay here and have benefited the most, I think, over the years, understand what we're trying to do, because every kid in my eyes and our eyes are valuable kids, and they have opportunities to grow to be the best they can be on the basketball court. But in my mind, it's the best they can be as human beings and as kids, growing up to then be adults like you and I now. And I think over time, parents that value the things that I'm describing, have supported us. And so we are 23, 24 years later, and still getting to try to convey the same message to kids and to parents.
Do you ever take parents aside and say, hey, what are you doing here? Because some are just flat out. And I thought that we were nuts 20 years ago, but parents that I see now, 90% of them are great. It's the 10% of the weirdos that kind of generate all the headlines. But do you have to every once in a while try to guide them through this?
What's great, Kent, is being a parent of 3 kids, and all 3 of them ended up playing college basketball and getting scholarships and having a great deal of success. But I was one of the crazy parents for many years as our kids were growing up. So whenever I'm able to offer any bits of encouragement, it's from experience. So I do get opportunities to help parents keep a perspective and a big picture, but it sometimes, as the book you've just recently written, sometimes those lessons come from experiencing your own mistakes, and so those are things that I'm able to pass on to lots and lots of parents.
Has basketball changed fundamentally in the 23 years since he opened the place?
Well, I sure see a heck of a lot of more athleticism. I see a lot with the 3-point line coming into play that wasn't around 23 years ago. I see kids becoming better shooters that practice it. I mean, we have a gun, the shooting gun, that kids, you saw them out there working on it today. So I think kids are putting a lot of time and effort, and they're getting better, in certain areas, and they're just getting, faster and stronger in certain areas. But at the end of the day, there's intangibles that make players, and basketball IQ that makes players. And those things sometimes need to be taught, and they need to be reinforced, and they need to be sort of highlighted. And so that's what we try to do with our IBA. We call it IBA Revolution. We have these teams that we put together. But I think kids still need to learn those things, even if they can shoot threes or they can do slam dunks, or they're the fastest kid out on the court. You still need to know the game, and you need to have the mental makeup of helping your teammate be better, and realizing that you're not going to be perfect, and you can't fall apart when things don't just go great. So there's a lot of nuances to being a great player, and we try to pass that on here.
With training, like basketball can become an isolated activity, right? I mean, you can go out there with a gun and you can keep yourself occupied for hours working on shooting in the same way that you can in playing tennis, hitting against a wall or something like that. But tennis is an individual sport, and basketball is a collective, collaborative sport. Do kids need to play more together? Do you think that working out individually has kind of sapped kind of that collaboration from the game a little bit? Or is that like an extension that just isn't accurate?
No, I think it helps kids, develop skills. So I'm a big proponent of it. But if you do that without playing with teammates or playing with a coach's direction, I think you're missing a huge element of the game. And so I'm even from day one, 23 and a half years ago, I've been a huge believer in kids playing to learn the game.
Yeah. You
got to play, and you got to be forced into uncomfortable situations and terrible situations, and there'll be great situations. But the more opportunity you have to face these various things that come your way, the more equipped I think you are to handle things when it really becomes important. But if you're only isolated in the gym on your own, I don't think that's enough.
When you watch Indiana basketball today, do you watch games today? Do you watch how you play?
I do some.
Periodically.
Yeah.
When you see them, do you think, okay, they're not doing it how we did it? Do you celebrate their accomplishments, or do you think that these guys, that they're missing the point? Is there, you know what I mean? Do you see it in frustration or in celebration?
I guess I don't know what the word is, but I know what goes into becoming successful, and I know that you can take an isolated situation in really any part of life and try to paint a picture that you think is very clear, and it may be may not have a clue what's going on. So,
see, you've been in the rooms, so you know this stuff.
Yeah, so I'm watching these games and I'm seeing what's unfolding, and I'm very slow to judge because, there's a lot of moving parts to the game of basketball, and so I'm a supportive fan and not a one who's going to whine about every little thing that happens, because I know everyone's trying to do their best, and it's very complicated to see the end result and point a finger at a specific thing.
Because you know exactly what that's like, although you didn't have a lot of reasons fans weren't real frustrated watching your 4 teams at Indiana. You went to the Final Four in 73. You should have won it in 75 if Scott didn't break his arm, and you ran the table in 76. So there wasn't a lot of judging from the balcony at Assembly Hall, right?
I think in those 4 years we may have lost, 11 games. So 4 Big Ten championships, sort of keeps the fan base on your side. Definitely.
Nobody's picking at the scabs when that kind of thing happens. Let me ask you about Knight today, because I think this is sort of interesting, and who knows the correct answer. Although I think I do, because he was really good at Texas Tech. Could he coach today? You take what Bob Knight was back in the mid-'70s, late 70s, and dump him into college basketball today. Is his team successful?
I would say he'd be very successful. I mean, you look at guys like Coach Krzyzewski, you see Greg Popovich, you see a lot of older coaches that are staying true to, what the fundamentals of the game and the honesty of, hard work and attention to detail and all the things that Coach Knight stood for. I think he could be extremely successful with his style.
He was unforgiving of mistakes. If you had to coach, would you be more forgiving of mistakes? Like he always said, right, that the victory favors the team making the fewest mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that... I think we're all sort of wired in a different way, and I admire his adherence to his standards, the standards of what it takes to be successful, and it's exhausting to correct someone constantly of, hey, this is how it needs to be done, and so I guess I'm probably a lot lazier in that. I'm more forgiving, maybe, of so I guess the comparison of me as a coach with Coach Knight would be, a lot different, and I would probably be so much less of a coach because I probably wasn't willing or wouldn't be willing to work as hard as he did to demand the perfection, or try to have them do the perfection that it may take to be successful. So anyway, I'm not answering your question very well, but
no, I think so.
He was unbelievable, and again, my personality is my arms are wide open to encourage kids, and if they make mistakes, I want them to keep trying it. And Coach Knight was the same way, but, he made sure you knew what the mistake was quite clearly.
All right, let me ask you about your kids. You went 3 for 3. You got 3 kids. They all played college basketball. You didn't have to go into your wallet once. That's perfection. Is that genetics? Is that upbringing? What was that? What do you attribute that to?
Well, I had mentioned earlier my faith, and so my answer is God's intervention and encouragement of just, as I look back at my life, just how the Lord's blessed me and my wife and gave us these kids and gave them athletic abilities and opportunities to play. So all 3 Division I Players. But interestingly, this would be a whole nother program, but our twins went to University of Pacific. They played at Carmel and went to University of Pacific. The year after, Michael Olowokandi from Pacific was the number 1 draft choice in the NBA. So he left, and then Matt and Andy went out there, and they were redshirted the first year and probably didn't help them that much in that their attention to detail on the court wasn't that great, and their attention to detail outside of the classroom was they spent a lot of time partying.
It wandered, as
a
it
little
tends
wandered.
to for people who go to college.
So, but it was so interesting to see how God used that situation to bring them both back to Christian schools, one at Grace College up in Warsaw for Matt, and Bethel College up in South Bend, Mishawaka for Andy, and how their lives went in amazing directions, going through the adversity that they faced in their 1 year of Division I basketball. And they have amazing success stories through all that. And then Todd, our youngest, went to Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, and ended up being a coach for 4 years, assistant coach there after 6 years of pro ball. And now he's at FAU, Florida Atlantic University, as an assistant coach. So anyway, that's the basketball history and the crazy part of the proud part, or the God-ordained part that my wife and I are enjoying is Todd. His wife's going to have our 10th grandchild. So each one of them have 3 kids as we speak, and in about a month, Todd and Micah will have their 4th. So that'll make us with 10 grandkids.
You'll have 2 units.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one girls' team and one boys' team, because it'll be 5 and 5. So.
Nice. And let's talk about the IBA for a minute. This is such a hallmark, and I got so nostalgic even driving back. We spent so many weekends here and so many weeknights here as parents of a kid who played here. People who want to get involved, how do they do that? People who have a kid, what ages, and what are they going to be exposed to?
Well, we... interestingly enough, we have a lot of kindergarten, first grade kids that come and they just get exposed. There's a long list of kids that are playing college and even professionally that started as young kids here at the IBA. And what's been interesting over the years is that we have kids that are not going to ever play high school basketball that have worn an IBA jersey, and their fondest memories of basketball will be playing on an IBA team, which I mentioned earlier, IBA Revolution. We have some kids that will be playing probably in college basketball who wear IBA Revolution. So we have a pretty wide range of backgrounds and abilities of kids, but we have training programs, we have camps every holiday, Christmas, and summer. And then again, probably our biggest by far part of our reach to kids and their families is this IBA Revolution. We have between 30 and 40 teams of kids from kindergarten through 8th grade that play on teams, and actually we're going into 9th and 10th grade this year.
Can you tell with a kid immediately at what level that kid is going to eventually play, or do you even worry about that? I mean, your view of this place is so holistic that I don't know whether you bother yourself with the basketball acumen of kids and projecting their level. But can you tell?
You can tell when a kid's been given some gifts that are unique, but you're also humbled in that you're not God, and you can't say, man, this is a surefire prediction. But yeah, you can typically tell kids that have that it factor. But boy, as we've talked even in our short discussion, there are so many little things that go into making a player that will play high school, college, or professionally that I think those are hard things to predict, because there's a million variables, including injury, that could happen in that period of time. But what's the fun part for us are the kids that are discarded early on by the the community programs that we are able to work with and see them grow and see them develop into players that you would never have predicted, early on, and that we've sort of been a haven for families that have kids that maybe aren't getting quite the opportunities that the parents are wanting or hoping that they would get maybe in their own community, that with an independent voice, that all of our coaches are hired coaches and not parents, have been able to have some, great outcomes. And so that's been fun to see.
Beautiful. Thank you for spending time. And thanks for having this place that was extremely impactful for my son and a bunch of his friends, and they have nothing but great memories of this place. And the lessons that they learned, I'm not even sure they realize at this point what they were.
It's amazing, Ken, as I see kids in their 20s and 30s, in Ryan's case, and hearing from their parents on their fond memories. And again, if we can have had any impact, that's great. But in Ryan's case, we didn't talk about this, but he had 47 points in the Lawyers League final game to win the Lawyers League championship only 3 or 4 or 5 months ago. So, he had that home court advantage from starting back in his early days.
The rims are still as forgiving as they were back in the day.
So we'll see if he can defend that Lawyers League championship here coming up here in another month.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
All right, Kent. Thank you, man.
The great Tom Abernathy. We're at the Indiana Basketball Academy today. This has been Sports Nothing But Sports for Thursday, November 7th, 2019. Join me tomorrow morning, Breakfast with Kent, Facebook Live at 8 o'clock, and then on Periscope Live at 8:15. It's a show so nice we do it twice, brought to you by the great people at Today's Dentistry. 317-849-2933. Join me tomorrow morning.